This is the Mental Mettle Podcast, and I am your host, Coach Matt Thomann. I'm a former athlete, teacher, coach, and athletic director that switched careers after surviving cancer and a stroke in the fall of 2020. But I'm also a dad of a son and a daughter that were successful high school athletes that went on to college. Now I use that experience along with my ICF coaching certification when helping teams, coaches, and athletes from all over the country. Each week, I will pose a specific question that will help coaches of all types better understand mental toughness. In the Mental Mettle Podcast, coaches will learn to help their athletes overcome adversity without being the adversity they need to overcome. Mettle is a person's ability to face adversity in a spirited and resilient manner. It is a great skill to have for athletics and for life, but it is not something we are born with. If you want it, you have to forge your mettle. And if you listen to the Mental Mettle Podcast, you already know that, but not everybody else does yet. So help me out by ordering and wearing some sweet The Mental Mettle Podcast gear. We've got short sleeve tees, long sleeve tees, and some super comfortable hoodies. Order online today and you can have your gear in no time. But the best part is that every order helps support the show and helps me spread the message that mental toughness is a trait that can and should be built. So find the link in the show notes, order your gear, and start showing that you know how to forge your mettle. Ho, 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 metalheads. And welcome to this special Christmas episode of the Mental Mettle Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Matt Thomann, and I'm excited to be here. It's one of my favorite times of year. It's just getting a chance to see more people, see the family, reflect on some things. It's like the end of the year. And then of course, Jesus is the reason for the season, and being able to celebrate the birth of our Lord and Savior, and just all the things, all the feels. I like every part of Christmas, but it also starts us into the new year. It's all, we're a week away from New Year's, and at the end of the year, it always becomes a place of reflection and thinking about things. And I got thinking about what I wanted to do for a special Christmas episode. I did one last year with my brother, if you want to go back and look at it. And we talked about It's a Wonderful Life quite a bit, and about how that change that we want to have happen, we wish it would be great if we could have some sort of magical transformation with an angel and be, hit over the head and seeing all the things that we're seeing wrong and what we could change. If we could just have that, we could make some change, but it doesn't happen like that. It takes time and effort to be able to do that. It's a great episode if you want to look back at that. It's a fun episode, but it's introspective as well. And I thought I want to do another episode, and it is movie. It is Christmas movie time. I've got a list of them that I go through every year. You got to go with, you got to do the classics. And when I say classics, I mean like Christmas Vacation, Home Alone, stuff like that. One of my classics is the Bill Murray adaptation, Scrooge, of the Christmas Carol. It's a fantastic there's all sorts of different Christmas Carol adaptations out there. I think by far, and I will fight you on this, the best version is the Muppet Christmas Carol. They do a fantastic job. I love it. I know it's a little cheesy. It's a little bit strange, but I love the Muppets. It's a really good one. There's other ones. I love some of the old ones. I love watching White Christmas every year. I'm forgetting some others. Of course, I watch them. I watch them all. And the two that I want to talk about today, just a little bit, is because they've got some of the worst characters in it. And one is the Christmas Carol, which you're talking about anything with Scrooge. And then, of course, Mr. Grinch. And what I want to talk about is how they are such obvious negative characters. So it's easy to see that where the movie is going from the beginning, or the book, if you're reading A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, which I've never read. I think I'm going to put that on my list. Everybody knows the story, but I've never actually read it. And I'm thinking I might sit down and actually read it. But anyway, with the Grinch and with Scrooge, that these stories are going to be stories of transformation. You can tell that from the beginning because they're so evil and vile that it's like, of course, this is where we're going with this story. And it seems obvious. It's like, hey, we want this person to change. We want to see this person because they're terrible to people. Scrooge is notorious for saying bah humbug to people. And he's talking about, he likes the dark because the dark is cold and it doesn't take, you have to burn coal to do it. He talks about how what's Christmas but a time for you to pay bills without money and find yourself older but not any richer. And he's talking about the strains on the pocketbook and just so many of the things that he's just terrible to people. And then, of course, the Grinch. I mean, it's the Grinch that stole Christmas and goes down to Whoville, and he's just stealing all the presents and doing the terrible stuff. And I love the metaphors in the song. As a coach, metaphors are a big thing. Like, we talk about metaphors being a way for us to see perspective differently, and the metaphors in that song are fantastic. Cuddly as a cactus, charming as an eel. You can sing along if you want, and you can get into a bad banana with greasy black peels. These are very vivid metaphors. Even to his heart. His heart's a dead tomato splotched with moldy purple spots. I mean, very vivid stuff, and calls him a nasty, wasky skunk, which is nasty. And listen, it's just a little bit of personal story here. We all know skunks stink, right? We're like, oh, skunks stink. Of course we know that. My little, I'm going to call it my wife's dog. It's our dog, but for this story, I'm going to call it my wife's. It's her little lap dog. He's a miniature golden doodle. And his name's Buddy. And there's another Christmas movie. So my dogs are named after the Elf movie. My yellow lab is Jovi, and my wife's miniature golden doodle, is Buddy. So we got Buddy and Jovi. But Buddy, the other day, this has been a little over a month ago, I let him out to go to the bathroom, and he happened to find a skunk and decided he wanted to have a fight with it. He loves to kill things, despite being this little miniature golden doodle. He's a real killer, and he got the back end of it, and it was a bad deal. And if you've never experienced that, everybody's smelled a skunk, but I'm convinced now, after experiencing it, that not everybody has tasted and smelled a skunk up close. It is a different experience, one that has scarred my inner soul. It is nasty. It is awful. He still smells like it. We can't get it off of him. So whenever they talk about Mr. Grinch being a nasty, wasty skunk, it's awful. And I have more appreciation for that now. But also, the Grinch goes even further. And that's going to be the kind of like this turn here for me. The Grinch is terrible to other people, but he's also terrible to himself, especially the episode, or the version with Jim Carrey. There's quotes. He's talking about him calling himself a loser, a freak, a weirdo. There's the really telling scene where he's yelling off the mountain, and he's getting his echo to talk back to him. And he has such a terrible negative inner voice that he yells, "I'm an idiot," off the mountain, and the echo even says, "You're an idiot." It is all, he can't even get this echo to say what he wants to say. It's all going to be focused on him. And I feel like that's how we are a lot of times. And when I say that's how we are, I know we are. it is in my working with a lot of athletes, coaches, individuals, things like that. We all have this inner Grinch and inner Scrooge. It is part of human nature. We are terrible to ourselves. So the Grinch and Scrooge are terrible people because they say terrible things to others. But we're way too nice for this, right? We aren't going to say nasty things about people's capabilities or people's looks to their face, right? We're not going to go out and tell you, "Oh, you did a terrible job. You aren't capable. You aren't a good husband. You aren't a good wife. You aren't a good employee. You aren't a good basketball player. You aren't a good coach. You are ugly. You're terrible. Your hair looks terrible." All these things. We would never go up and say something like that to someone in person. And for the most part, we don't even think that. We don't even think about that of others. But what we do, there we go. What we do is we say those things to ourselves. And we do it a lot. And what's worse than that is we think that's acceptable. And we think that is the only way we make ourselves better. And anytime somebody's talking to me about that, say, "Well, yeah, I use this negative voice and I use it to drive me." And I usually say, "How's that working out for you in the long run? You feel like it's doing more good than harm to beat yourself up?" And usually the answer is, after some self-reflection and just looking inward, that they realize it doesn't. And the research would follow with that. There's a lot of research out there. There's some stuff. There's some research I've got from psychologist Kinderman, and there's others, but they all talk about how if we use rumination is a fancy word for just looking at things that we've done wrong or thinking we've done wrong or the mistakes we've made and doing the rumination. And so rumination and self-talk can contribute to mental health issues. They're like the precursor to mental health issues. And when I say mental health issues, I'm talking about anxiety, depression, leading to suicidal ideation, things like that. These are things that this rumination, and we all do it. And sometimes I talk about, it's like what we think about when we're laying in bed. What we did wrong, beating ourselves up, or in the moment when we make mistakes and we beat ourselves up about what we did wrong. These are things that I think that we think is okay. The society tells us it's okay. And the research would tell us that it is not okay. It is not healthy. And if you really want to start to become mentally tough, and if you start to want to have more inner well-being and more resilience, you have to start with your own inner voice. One of the issues with an inner voice, and some people think, that I'm going to use an inner voice as a place of motivation to drive myself and become better. And a lot of people do this. What they're going to find is that it can work for a short time. It can make us better in the short time frame. It'll drive us perhaps to change a couple things. But if we don't address that, and if we keep up with that negative voice, it leads us down this path where it's not helpful, it's harmful. And the reason it happens is because in order for us to use a negative voice, it has to do two things. It has to use lies, and it has to use a lot of volume. Think about when you're arguing with somebody who's losing the argument and who really doesn't know what they're talking about, but they want to keep arguing anyway. What do? They start making things up, they use lies, and they get really, really loud and just start yelling. Our inner voice is the same thing. our inner voice is more than happy to tell us lies and tell them really loud, to the point that you might have a really bad day at work as a coach, as a teacher, as whatever you do, or you might really have a bad day as a parent, or you might have a really bad game. And we start telling our things like, I'm the worst. I'm the worst parent. I'm the worst spouse. I'm the worst player. I'm the worst coach. There's a lot of terrible people out there. The chances of you being the worst and you're listening to this show, I guarantee you're not the worst. It's not a truth. It's not a truth. It's not truthful, but we do that and we use that and we think it's okay, but it's not. And anytime I work with an athlete or anybody who works on a team, I say, I want you to analyze your voice and the words you say to yourself. And then I want you to imagine saying it to a teammate or a coworker. And it's at that moment that we get a lot of insight and we start to realize, I would never say that to another human being in my life. Well, then why do you think it's okay to say it to yourself? And why would you not say it to that person? Well, I feel like it would beat them down. I feel like it would make them hate me. It would make them feel terrible about themselves. It might drive them to a dark place. It might cause them some depression. Like, okay, check. Right? These are things you don't want for yourself. If you don't want it for yourself, then don't speak to yourself like that. And I know it's hard. Anytime that we're in a time of stress, so like say the holidays, and it gives us, like anytime we go to see family and just spending some money and doing things like that, or you have some stressors at your job, or if you're in a sport, whatever it is, anytime we're in these ideas of stress, it can make that negative voice pop up, and it gets, we get a lot of self-criticism. We're resistant to change. It can show up with fear. All of these things make that voice, and it can manifest itself in different ways we talk to ourselves. Some people's negative voice is loud and critical. Some is like whiny and making fun of them. Some of them is just mocking. But it's there. And I'd like you to start to think about. So this is going to be, something I want you to start looking at. Anytime you want to make a change, you have to do two things. When you have to do some recognition, and you have to recognize what it is you want to change. And then we talk about where we want to go instead. Well, we're at the recognition piece here. I need you to start to analyze, what's my inner Scrooge? What's my inner Grinch? Maybe you have another character, some Christmas character that is more applicable, right? But I want you to think about your inner negative voice. And the more you can dig into it a little bit and figure out, where's it coming from? Perhaps it could be coming from some terrible places. It could be coming from some trauma or from some expectations. It could be focused on our flaws and our imperfections. And there might be a little truth to it, but the voice loves to pick out. I mean, we know ourselves better than anybody, so we're really good at picking out the little nuggets of truth and then just exploding them, making them worse, and then saying it over and over and over again. Again, something absolutely awful that you would never, ever do to another human being. So I want you to take some time. If you need to pause it. But I want you to think about your inner voice. Think about the words that you use. Think about the tone that you use. Think about the situations that trigger it. Think about the results of it. So take a moment. If you need to pause it, but I want you to actually write some things down and think about what you can do to better recognize that negative voice. Okay? So pause it and do that, and I'll be right here. All right, so hopefully now you've got a little bit of handle on your negative voice, your inner Grinch, your inner Scrooge. And then it's really useful for you to take a moment. And I hate doing this, but it's useful, and it's probably not hard for most people. And I want you to think about that voice and the words it says, how you use it. And I want you to think for a moment, even close your eyes if you want. And I want you to recognize the feeling that causes you in your body. In the coaching business, we call that embodiment. How our thoughts can turn into physical emotions that we can feel. And we know this. So a lot of times our negative inner Scrooge voice or Grinch voice triggers a host of internal feelings. And that could be a nauseated stomach. It could be a tension in the chest. It could be tight shoulders. It could be a headache. And we're probably familiar with these feelings in times of stress. As a coach, it could be, coming up to a big game or during the game. For an athlete, it could be when they come up to bat or when they're back to serve or just before the game. And this negative voice about this fear that I'm going to make a mistake starts turning into a physical feeling. Now, there's certainly some good to being a little bit anxious and a little bit nervous about a game, of course. But the negative voice can take it way too far. When we start to worry way too much about what might happen, we get this fear. And if it's not, so when I talked earlier about how this negative voice and this rumination and this worry can spiral downward and become mental health problems, a little bit is okay. But if you don't get in control of it, it can spiral down to the point that athletes can't even function. And I've worked with kids where that happens, where they play their sport. I've seen it a fair amount with like baseball players and stuff, and they get to the point they're scared to even swing the bat for fear of what might happen. Basketball players get scared to even shoot for fear of what might happen, right? Because they don't want that negative feeling so much, so they get tense and they don't want to do it. And that becomes an issue. That's when we have to deal with something. But even before it gets to that issue, that very extreme example, if you start to play, you practice nice and loose, but then when you get into a game and you're nice and tight, you'll see people, that athletes and coaches that can't perform under game time circumstances because it's affecting their body. Well, athletics is all about your body, but it doesn't have to be for athletes. This could be for you and your job and your family, and you just aren't operating in your own best way. I mean, people always like to joke about being your best self, but this is what it's about. Like, not operating at 100% physical and mental and emotional capacity means we're not ourselves, and we don't get the results we want. We aren't the people we want to be. And your negative voice and your inner Scrooge saying bah humbug, and your inner Grinch saying you're an idiot, those things have real repercussions, short term and long term. And they're just issues that you need to develop or develop tools to deal with. So we're in that part right now where that it is a recognition piece. Okay. And now that we've got that recognition piece, we can start figuring out how we want to work on that.
Parents, is your athlete ready for the upcoming sports season? They might have the strength, the speed, and the skills, but without confidence, they could still struggle when the game is online. Skill and strength are great. They're necessary, but they're not used to their full potential without the right mentality. Confidence is key. It's the key to unlocking that full potential. And at Mental Mettle Coaching, I offer personalized sessions designed to build the confidence your athlete needs for a successful season. My proven techniques empower them to perform under pressure, both on the field and in life. Don't let a lack of confidence hold them back. Book a free session today and discover the power of confidence. Visit the website and get started on the journey to a more confident and successful athlete with Mental Mettle Coaching. Coaches, do you dream of guiding mentally tough athletes towards a championship? Kids that are resilient, persistent, and unshaken by setbacks. Well, in today's world, those athletes aren't born. They have to be developed. Many athletes face significant challenges and risk burnout. So how do we foster that mental toughness without overwhelming them? Well, introducing the Ember to Inferno program, Building Mentally Tough Athletes. This series is designed specifically for coaches, offering a deep dive into your own journey of mental toughness and equipping you with practical tools to build confidence and belief in your athletes. Rather than just simply adding more adversity to their life, we focus on creating a strong foundation for mental resilience. You'll learn how to transform a spark of motivation into a blazing fire of toughness using techniques that address challenges like social media pressures, athletic stress, and trauma. Don't just wish for mentally tough athletes, build them. Join the Ember to Inferno program today and ignite the potential in your athletes. For more information, contact me, Coach Thomann, at Mental Mettle Coaching.
So now that we're going to move forward, let's talk about what we want to have happen, what we do want to happen. And it's very important that you understand that it is not, it might be somewhat useful to say, I'm going to stop my negative voice and I'm going to try my negative voice to stop my negative voice from talking in these situations. And you should, and you can, but in any pursuit, it is not all that useful or efficient to talk about what you don't want to have happen. Think about it from a sports perspective. You had an athlete, basketball player, and going to the free throw line. Imagine you're a coach and you just looked at him and said, "Don't miss." You'd be like, that is the worst thing you could say. If you were talking to a softball player, baseball player coming up and said, "Don't strike out," that's the worst advice you could give. It goes down the line. Golfers, don't slice, don't hit it in the water. Why would we do that? We wouldn't do that. A volleyball player, don't hit it in the net. Why would you do that? You would never do that. You would never, it's like speaking that into existence. Like Derek Jeter said, the last thing you say is the first thing you do. So we're going to say, don't strike out. You're probably going to strike out. That's applicable here because I don't want you to go into a situation of stress and say, don't use your negative voice. Don't use your negative voice. Don't use your negative voice. Don't be Grinch. Don't be Scrooge. You're going to be Scrooge. You're going to be Grinch. It's so much better to focus on what you want. I've talked about this podcast before, is like so much of what we need to do is determining what we want to focus on and become, and have that become our goal. I'm going to focus on this. This is what I want to have happen. So we need to start developing a positive voice. And before we do anything, I'm going to tell you, if you have operated with a negative voice in your head, running around, being Grinch, being Scrooge, saying bah humbug, and all these things for years, starting to operate in a positive inner voice is going to feel, awkward's one word, but it's more than awkward. It's going to feel childish. You're going to think it's silly. You're going to feel like it's the wrong way to do things. You're like, this can't be right. This is silly. This is stupid. It's no different than again, a sports analogy, if you ever have to change anything in your golf swing or change anything in your baseball swing or your football or the way you're pitching or the way you're shooting. If you ever have to change anything, or when you were playing, needed to, or anytime you need to develop something in your form, it feels weird. And it's weird, and you have to get through that. It's the exact same thing with your inner voice. It is going to feel awkward, and it's going to feel backwards, and it's going to feel silly. And part of that is because of the way you've operated, and part of that is because of the way the world is and where our society is. And it is cooler, and people act like it's better to have this negative voice that drives us, and it is just not okay. It is just not okay. And the positive voice is so much more useful. We could go through a list of all sorts of reasons. We could go biblical. There's scriptures about do not be anxious about anything. There's so many things. The research is really clear. There's a lot of research on if you operate in a positive voice. Earlier we said the negative voice. If you have the negative voice, it makes you spiral down towards these anxiety, depression, things like that. If you operate in a positive voice, there are all sorts of cool things it does. The easiest, the number one, it's tied to a increased lifespan. Okay. Lower rates of depression, reduced stress and pain, better resilience to illness, and just overall better well-being. It goes down the list, blood pressure, all sorts of these physical maladies, and it makes you better to operate in a positive voice. I speak a lot from experience here. This is one of the tough things that I really faced and still face. I know that I can't make the strong, I can't prove this, but when I had my stroke in 2020, I was in a really rough place. I had not handled my cancer all that well. I was really feeling sorry because I'd let some things go, and I was so worried about it, and I was really beating myself up over a lot of things. It was in the middle of the pandemic, and I was running a school. My negative voice, I thought I couldn't do anything right. I was calling myself an idiot. I was really beating myself a lot. I spent nights when we were talking about that rumination and going down the drain. I didn't sleep much. I was constantly worrying about things I did wrong and mistakes I'd made, and really worrying about myself. And again, I can't prove it, but you can't prove. You can't tell me it's not related. That I had that much just angst and hate for myself and the way I talked to myself, and then not but a couple months into it, I had my stroke. And it's just so real to me now that I could think about how I felt at those times and how much I was really just beating myself up and talking about, and I had stress headaches and just elevated blood pressure, all the things that we talked about. And I could feel those things. Now looking back, I could feel those things. And I should have known how bad that was for me. But of course I didn't. I didn't change anything. I had to get, I had to get hit over the head with some stuff. And it was only a little bit after that I started in my story here that I got some help and started learning about positive psychology and really started leaning into this idea of this positive voice and how important it is. And it's not easy. It's still a struggle for me, but I now have to think about it. And that's what I want you to do is we've done some recognition on your negative voice. We have to start talking about what your positive voice is. For most of us, it's kind of easy to recognize our negative voice. But a lot of us don't have a great positive voice. And we have to start reframing things differently and start talking to ourselves in a positive way. And that might be actually celebrating things you've done well. Perhaps you've never been the type of person that does that. In your job, your career, your sport, you actually make some progress and you don't celebrate it. You don't say, you never tell yourself, hey, I did a good job. That's good. I put in hard work and I got better. And because we've been told that's not how we do things. Like you can't praise yourself for something you've done well. Well, you're missing out the best opportunity to gain confidence. If you can't look at the things you put hard work into and seen the results and can't like laud that a little bit and kind of like say, hey, that's a good thing, right? You're missing the opportunity to actually get better. And the same with your affirmations. Like you need to remind yourself of what you're good at. What are your values? What are your strengths? And if you don't know what those are, like talk to other people. You have values, you have strengths. There's all sorts of value finders and strength finders. You can figure out what kind of Enneagram you are and look at the positives of those and notice some real truthful things about yourself. Your negative voice loves to hate, loves to use lies. I want your positive voice to be built in absolute truth. And I know that it took a little bit for me to do that, but that's what I want you to do. And that could be something you might really struggle with this part. This would be a part where it's really nice to have a coach to help you do that. But there's all sorts of, again, some tests. And I'm not talking about tests like, I don't want you to figure out what sort of Hogwarts house you were belong to, but there's all sorts of online tests that some are accredited and they're research based where you can start talking about what your strengths are and lean into those and talk about what is my strength? What am I good at? How do I want to use that? And start thinking about that strength and that self affirmation. And then you have to continue to encourage yourself with that idea. And I think one of the ways I do that is once you find something that you want to, can feel good about yourself, something you've done, something you are doing, something about a strength. I think it needs to be something that you turn into this little mantra. It's a session I do with every one of my clients. We start building this voice, this positive affirmation, and we put it on a picture. We put it on, something they can put as a screenshot on their phone. And again, it is an extremely personal thing for everyone. But it has to be something you have to put time into. I can't, we're doing a podcast here. I can't just tell you, here's what you need to say to yourself, because the more it is based in truth, the better. The more you can believe it and believe it for yourself, because I'm not about you saying lies about yourself, and I am not about arrogance. I am not about arrogance at all. Arrogance is thinking you can do everything whenever you really can't, and it's not backed up by anything. But I'm all about confidence, because confidence is knowing what you're able to do and then go and doing it. And that's what I want. I want you to feel confident. I want your confidence to be based in truth. So what are you confident about? And I want that to become some sort of mantra that you write, even if it's, I can do it, you can do it. But like, the way you talk to yourself. I've got this long list of things I work with my athletes and coaches that I work with. And I want you to recall that this is going to feel awkward at first. If you've never practiced any self-affirmations, it's going to feel awkward. It's going to be silly. But the more you practice them, the more you change your form, the more you practice that golf swing or that free throw shot, the easier it's going to be and the more success you're going to have. So you just need to start to figure out a way to find a truthful affirmation that you can remind yourself of daily, maybe even more than daily, at least in the morning, at least in the evening. And the reason I say that that's important, you might say, well, I'm just going to tell myself this affirmation whenever I need it, when I feel stressed. It doesn't work that way. So if you want to be good at something when the chips are down, whenever there's the game's on the line, as we say, you have to practice it at other times. So if you need to be able to tell yourself, like, I don't know, let's come up with something that you're confident. I am useful. If that's my affirmation. I am smart and I'm useful. That's an affirmation. I'd like it to be a little bit catchier, but that's what I'm going to say. If I'm smart and I'm useful, and that's my affirmation, and you are in a time of stress, say you're taking a test or something's really stressful, and you're already starting to go down that path, you're not going to buy it. If that's the only time you've ever said it to yourself, you have to get up in the morning, and I mean, you have to Stuart Smalley that thing. If you don't know who that is, that's that Saturday Night Live guy that looks in the mirror and says, "I'm good enough and I'm smart enough. Doggone it, people like me." Well, you don't have to do it like that, but you have to come up and you have to practice that self affirmation to yourself in the morning, in the evening, at other times, and have this affirmation about yourself so that when you need it, whenever that negative inner Grinch or inner Scrooge starts talking, and they will, you have to be able to tell it to stop and have something that you've practiced to fill it with. Remember, we can't just say, don't use your negative voice, because that's not going to do it. You have to have something to fill it with. And there is nothing about this stuff that is rocket science. It's not. The challenge isn't doing this. The challenge isn't recognizing your negative voice or writing a positive affirmation onto a piece of paper. The magic, the Christmas magic of this, only comes from you repeating this and practicing it and working on it. That's where it happens. There is no magic wand. There's no Christmas magic. It has to be something you work on. But it is a gift worth giving to yourself. This inner voice, this inner positive voice, is just one of the best gifts that you can give yourself. And I want you to, that's my challenge for you to do this, is to do this and know what you're aiming for. Those physical ailments and mental, emotional issues that come with that negative voice are just, it's not what we want for ourselves. We want this place of emotional well-being, and I want that for you. But you're going to have to put time and effort into it. If you want this lasting change in your mental and emotional state, you've got to put the work in. There's nothing, like, you can't, there's no cheat. And if that's something that you want, but you are like, I'm going to struggle with this, I'm telling you that working with a mental coach, a life coach, a professional coach, a business coach, it is one of the best things you can do for yourself. I want you to do this, give yourself this gift of a positive inner voice this season. But if you struggle with it, know that the money spent and the time spent, the effort spent working with a coach, it's worth it. It's worth it. Get over yourself, get some help, do that, and you will really, really see a transformation with that. And that's my hope for you. And if you've made it this long into my Christmas episode and you are interested in some coaching, I'm going to give you a gift here. If you contact me and you say you want the Grinch special, I'm going to offer it 25% off of any of my coaching programs. And that can be for you, for an athlete, for a team that you have. So if you come up to me and tell me you want the Grinch special, thanks for listening this long and having to deal with me talking about this, but guarantee that if you call me, email me and talk about the Grinch special, we will do sessions talking about your inner Scrooge voice, your Grinch voice, and what we want your voice of hope to be, and your voice of transformation to be, and your voice of encouragement to be. And we will work on that, and that'll be my goal. And my plan is to help you change and build through that voice. So Yeah, so it's Merry Christmas to one and all. Thanks for listening. Thanks for liking. Thanks for sharing. I really appreciate it. And this has been the Mental Mettle Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Matt Thomann, and always remember, forge your metal.
Thanks again for listening to the Mental Mettle Podcast, produced by Coraggio Media, sponsored by QuickCut, a video management platform for every level of play, and by Mental Mettle Coaching, helping athletes learn to face adversity in a spirited and resilient way. The Mental Mettle Podcast is created each week to help players develop more mental toughness, and that is something that will help all of us. So help me out and like and share the Mental Mettle Podcast with your friends. Until next time, keep forging your metal.